Excellent, excellent. So this is actually a presentation that I will be giving at Forma in 2 weeks, along with Reverend Timothy Siemens, who a compatriot of mine on the Executive Council Committee on Antiracism. And so the committee is made up of representatives from each of the 9 provinces of the church. And in addition to those 9 representatives, and I represent Province 1, and in addition to those 9 representatives, there are 2 liaisons. One is Heidi Kim, whom we've had on this program before. She is the Episcopal Church Staff Liaison. And the other liaison is Reverend Jabril Ballantyne, who is liaison to the Executive Council and Advocacy and Networking Committee. And so along with them and ex officio members are the presiding bishop, President Jennings, and I believe Vice President Byron Rushing, who we have also had on this program before on this webcast. They are ex officio members. So it is this committee, which I've been asked to chair, that is responsible for looking after the work of the church in eliminating the sin of racism. That is actually the mandate that is given the committee to monitor and oversee the work of eliminating the sin of racism throughout the church. So one of the things that we decided we needed to focus on was training. There's been a history of training. Many of you are aware of the Seeing the Face of God training that Jane Oason created when she was the staff commissioner for anti-racism. And she delivered that training and trained the trainers for that training. In 2012, the funding for that position went away. And the church has not funded any replacement of her up through this day. And the thinking of the bodies up till now has been, well, training is out there. There's a lot of different people doing a lot of different training, so we really don't need to have one person dedicated to doing training, to doing train the trainers, and keeping a list of everyone who's been trained. Our committee, when I joined and took over as chair, looked at this and said, this doesn't make sense. We need a way to not only make sure that people take training, and there are actually canons, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes in the presentation, but not only do we need a way to make sure people have taken training according to the canon and according to the General Convention resolution, but just saying that someone's taken training is not sufficient. We haven't defined what training is, first of all. So to say everyone should have taken anti-racism training, that doesn't mean a lot. How do you measure that? And secondly, in doing this work, you have to have a certain level of knowledge and skill. In doing this work of eliminating the sin of racism, you have to have a certain level of knowledge and skill. And that's not just knowing the definition of racism. It's not just knowing the definition of white privilege. There's a skill in using the knowledge of the concepts that everyone who's going to do this work needs. And just saying that someone's taken anti-racism training doesn't mean that they have really obtained and proven that they have those skills to do this work. So we said, what can we do as a committee to help the church really meet the need that is upon us? And out of that, several meetings over the last couple of years has resulted in this framework that I'm about to share with you. And the framework consists of some components that I'm going to be talking about. But before I talk about that, I want to share a few key definitions. And I've talked a little bit already about the reasons for training. I'll say a little bit more about reasons for training. Then I'll get into the framework components themselves. And finally, talk about development of training based on this framework and a certification process that we are putting forth as a General Convention resolution for consideration by General Convention in June.
So James, can I interrupt you for a minute? I'm seeing that folks are saying that there's some kind of echo. And there had been a request for people to mute. So I'm wondering if that will solve the problem.
It could. So we can ask people to mute and see if it does. And I'm curious, are you seeing this little box on the right-hand side of my screen with video images in it, with your images in it? Or are you just seeing my slide?
I'm just seeing slides at the moment.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Then I will continue. Thank you. So let's start off with a few key definitions. And the key definitions here that I want to start off with are really those that are important for this time we have together here tonight. And there are other definitions that we'll talk about later on, but I want to talk about these in just a minute because these are definitions, some base definitions that ECCAR, the committee, we use ECCAR because no one wants to say that long Executive Council Committee on Anti-Racism name. These are some key definitions that ECCAR has identified that set the context for this work. So first of all, race. And key here is it's a concept used in the categorization of humans into groups, combinations of shared traits, ancestry, and genetics, and social and cultural traits. One of the key concepts we want to get across is that while race is a biological construct to some degree, it's also a social construct. It's used as a social construct. So the training, when we talk about training around anti-racism, that's one of the key concepts we want to make sure that everyone is basing this training on, that race is a biological, scientific construct, but it's also a social construct. A person developed the concept of race. Racism being the practice of discriminating against people based on their race, national, ethnic background. Anti-racism, combating racism wherever it's found or preventing racism from occurring. So two different types here, reactive and a proactive aspect of anti-racism in the work that we're trying to do. Racial reconciliation. This is a term that the presiding bishop has really brought into vogue in his episcopate. Healing the wounds caused by racism. And it's different than anti-racism. This is kind of an evolution of the work that we've been doing, which has been combating or trying to prevent. We're healing the wounds. So you're going to hear the term anti-racism used, and you may hear the term racial reconciliation used somewhat interchangeably. We are trying to move toward use of the term racial reconciliation, and in fact, one of the resolutions that we are putting forth for General Convention is to change our name so that it is not the Executive Council Committee on Anti-Racism, but the name will hopefully be the Executive Council Committee on Anti-Racism and Racial Reconciliation to represent that shift. And then finally, training. We use that term a lot. A lot of people use that term. And many people don't have a good definition of what that means. So we try to incorporate that in the way we talk and what we present, being teaching or developing in oneself or others skills and knowledge that relate to specifically useful competencies. So with those key definitions in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about some reasons for anti-racism training. And this set of reasoning can be used by anyone who is doing this work of developing training or delivering training or advertising. And this is based on Aristotle's work. And he taught I have this sneaky suspicion that Julie is trying to come in, and when she comes in, she's coming in as host and muting me. So I'll just keep continuing to unmute, and hopefully that will work. So Aristotle talked about and taught how to argue, how to be persuasive. And when he talked about arguments, he came up with the concepts of ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos being ethics, pathos being emotions, and logos being logic. And what he said was any good argument, the best arguments, have each of these three combined in it. So any argument, anything you want to persuade someone about has an ethical component, has an emotional component, and has a logical component. And you can see down at the bottom, persuading using one's credibility, persuading using emotional appeal, and persuading using logic. So credibility we bring from our baptismal covenant. We bring from the teachings of Jesus. That's the credibility. The emotional appeal we bring through the fact that everyone wants to be treated equally. Right? The logical piece is, and this is sometimes more difficult to get at, but the logical piece is we all benefit when everyone is treated equally and is treated fairly and is feeling like they are treated equally. So we talk about bringing these three components to the training that we're putting forth through the framework we're developing, and in the advertising about the work that we're doing, about putting on these workshops, convincing people to come. We use ethos, pathos, and logos to do that. So with that, I'm going to be cognizant of time here. I do want to stop for a minute and just ask Karen, are there any posts, is there any chat about this or about anything I've said so far? And please, folks, feel free to type into chat your questions, your thoughts. It's an opportunity to share with the others who are on the call as well your thoughts. We have a little more time than usual, so I am going to make this a little more interactive throughout than we might usually make. So Karen, any comments or thoughts posted?
No, I have not seen any new, wait a minute, I do see one. It says, what did you just say about the logos part?
The logos part. So the logic is that we all benefit as a society and as individuals when everyone is treated equally and feels that they're treated equally. And we could spend a whole hour or so on each of these, by the way. So I'm really just introducing the concepts to you at this point. So you get a glimpse of what we're talking about as part of this framework. All right, so hopefully that helped a little bit. Appealing to the logical mind is what Logos is all about. So if that's the last, I think I see we went from, there's another post there, 13. There were 12 before, and they're 13 now.
I don't see another post after the, oh, yes, it helps.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to move on. And talk about the components. So this graphic is something that you're going to see now as representing the framework that we've put together. And in the middle are what we call the 3 components that we expect to be included in any training about anti-racism or reconciliation that occurs. We expect that there will be a historical component, we expect that there will be a didactical component, and we expect that there will be activities. The historical component is about the history of racism with a focus on racism in the Episcopal Church. How has racism been exhibited in the Episcopal Church in the past? What have we done to deal with that fact that we as a church in the past actually supported racism? Because we want to make sure we understand the context in which we are living and the context in which we operate as Episcopalians. Okay. Then we have some didactical component, which is where we're helping everyone to understand the key definitions of concepts that are involved in racism and anti-racism. Okay. And then we have activities. And the activities are designed to help people take that knowledge, the historical knowledge, the didactical knowledge, and learn how to, and practice, applying that knowledge in doing the work of anti-racism and racial reconciliation. So this is where you start to see that we're not just talking about awareness of the concepts and the definitions. We're talking about skills and behavior that uses that knowledge toward eliminating the sin of racism, toward racial reconciliation. Now, with those components, as with any good training, we expect for the training to have learning objectives defined up front for the learning event. So objectives could be, we expect that after this training, you will be able to describe why white privilege is so important to understand and how you can combat it. That's a learning objective. Okay. So we expect that any training that goes on will have up front for the learners learning objectives articulated and bought into. Along with that, the learning objectives, we truly believe that any training that occurs needs to happen in a safe space. So we expect that any training will have respectful communication guidelines described up front, and everyone is agreed on those. And these are exactly the kinds of respectful communication guidelines that we had Dr. Eric Law talk to us about in our webcast last year. Because it was November that we had that webcast. So if you're interested in learning more about respectful communications and setting safe spaces, take a look at the November webcast that we did. So this is the framework, the overall framework itself, and I'm going to go in next into some details about each of these. But I'll stop just for a minute here and see if there are any questions about the overall framework of what we expect to be included in any anti-racism training.
Any questions? You can type them in. Okay, James, I guess you can go forward.
Okay, thank you. So let's look at what we mean the historical components. And I'm not going to go through all of these. This is really just meant to show you what the components, what the concepts are in each of these components. So things like the history of racism in the church, the canonical requirements for anti-racism training by canon. Anyone who is going through the ordination process must have taken anti-racism training. There's a checkbox. The Commissions on Ministry, similar to I serve on the Commission on Ministry for the Episcopal Church in New Hampshire. So part of my job is to make sure that anyone who comes through the process has taken anti-racism training. Now, this is where ECCAR has said, well, checking out the box, we know from talking with people across the church that bishops are left up to their own discretion as to what it means to check off that box. It's left up to their discretion to determine what anti-racism training makes sense for them. And our sense is that's not good enough. It's not consistent across the church. And one bishop could say, well, this person's taken a 1 hour anti-racism training, so I'm going to check off the box. 1 hour is not nearly enough for someone who's going to be ordained as a priest to be able to deal with the sin of racism and do the work of helping to eliminate it.
So, James, can I interrupt? I see two comments here, both of them talking about the PDSC's Waste the Power of an Illusion,
Yes.
And we also in Diocese of Mass have used that too. It is a good resource in terms of history.
Great. So there are all sorts of resources in terms of history, and in the, no, I guess I didn't say, this framework is going to be published on the racial reconciliation page of the Episcopal Church website. There's going to be a press release about it any day now. I'm working with the communications staff at 815 to put out a press release on this. So what we mean when we say these components we believe are important is going to be defined in that document that we're going to publish. And we're also going to have, we have resources in that document. It's a 28-page document. We have links to resources for most of these, if not all of these. The Church's Contemporary Response to Racism. There's a research report that a former member of ECCAR, Yolanda Lee, commissioned, which summarizes our contemporary response and listing the General Convention resolutions that have come up around anti-racism, the listing of statements made by the bishops out of the House of Bishops around anti-racism, and a number of other responses that the Church has put forth. There are General Convention resolutions, as I mentioned, so those need to be known by people doing this work, pastoral letters, and the Becoming Beloved Community effort, long-term commitment plan that the presiding bishop and staff have put forth last year are historical components that we want to make sure everyone is aware of. The didactic components are those listed here. Our baptismal covenant is first and foremost. There are essential concepts or definitions. I believe we have, there's a table in the document that has about 25 definitions, from race to racism to white privilege to oppression to intersectionality to what's another good one there? Well, but 25 of them. So those are the key terms and concepts, essential concepts that everyone needs to know as they're dealing with this work. What is racial reconciliation? And I talked about that definition just a little while ago as being different than anti-racism. So we want to make sure everyone knows any training covers, any training that's really going to be helpful to folks, defines all of those terms. Because just knowing the definition of race and racism is not enough. There's some tenets of racial reconciliation, some tenets about how to do the work of racial reconciliation that we talked about. I just mentioned intersectionality, the concept that we are individuals and we are not just one thing. We don't just have one characteristic. Some of us are male and black. Some of us are female and white. Some of us are transgender and Latino. So in dealing with people and how they address racism, we want people to consider individuals as individuals and not just a person as part of a group. Doctrine of discovery, becoming co-conspirators, are the other two major areas that we talk about in the didactic components.
So there's a question about what are co-conspirators?
What are co-conspirators? So co-conspirators are people not of color who are doing this work, who can help us do this work and actually must help us do this work, because race was not created, in social construct was not created by people of color. Therefore, we can't fix it. It's not instituted by people of color. It's not instituted by institutions that are run by people of color. It's instituted by people who are of European American descent, people who are in control of our institutions. So only those people can really affect the change. We as people of color can raise the flag and say, there's an issue here, we're not being addressed fairly, but we don't control the systems. We don't control the institutions. So we need co-conspirators, people who are working with us, people of color, to make change.
So that's the second question. Briefly, co-conspirators are white allies, question mark?
Briefly, yes.
And then there's a question about the doctrine of discovery. So I'll let you go on.
Sure. So the doctrine of discovery, this is something that came up during our previous presiding bishop's time, and she put forth a doctrine about indigenous peoples and how the Episcopal Church needed to take, what's the word I want? Needed to admit that we, unfortunately, aided and played a role in eliminating the people in North America, indigenous peoples, who were here first. So that's referred to as the doctrine of discovery. Okay. Anything else before I move on?
I think that covers so far.
Okay, great. So the next component of the three is activities. Activities that, as I mentioned, help to build skills and reinforce the knowledge that has been shared around historical information and didactic information. So creating safe spaces through the respectful communications effort. Learning check-ins or lessons learned spread throughout the training, preferably good training practices say that learning check-ins, little quizzes should be sprinkled throughout the training to force people to reflect on what they've learned and bring back from their own memories what they've learned. And that helps to solidify the learning. Prayer, reflection, and confession, feedback to self and others. And, you know, we actually talk about, and we've actually considered doing more of this in a next version of this, but we talk about training could actually and may best work as a liturgy. So you can think about having prayer at the beginning. Think about, if it's a long enough training, you could even have a Eucharist in the middle, or lunch, and then a closing prayer at the end. We've found that putting training in this liturgical construct makes people think about the material and act with the material in a different way than if it's just a secular kind of training. Okay. And then customized activities, we recognize that one-size training will not fit everyone. And this is one of the complaints that we've heard about seeing the face of God. It's not for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody. And in fact, there are cases where you want to have homogeneous audience going through training, and there are some cases where you want a heterogeneous audience to go through training. And for each audience, there are some issues locally that you will probably want to address. If you're in Alabama, if you're in Selma, you have some history there that is unique to Selma. And you should feel free to use that uniqueness in the training that you deliver. That uniqueness doesn't exist here in Boston or in New England. But we have our own background and history and customs and whatnot that we should be drawing upon. So we really just wanted to recognize, as we build this church-wide framework, and we chose the word framework very carefully. We're not saying exactly what has to be in, exactly how these things need to be communicated. We're just saying they need to be communicated. And here's some base definitions that we believe everyone should be following as they put together this training and deliver the training.
So James, can I pause you for a minute? There are 3 questions and or comments.
Okay, good, good.
The first one is white supremacy addressed under discovery, didactical, or where?
White supremacy is addressed under didactical, and it's one of the definitions that we have in the 25 that I mentioned.
Okay. The second is a suggestion. The language of safe spaces has been evolving, as safe can be sometimes misunderstood as not engaging difficult issues. A movement has been growing to call for safe but brave spaces where people take risks. Mm-hmm. And then the third is the Diocese of Western Mass used liturgical content and their experiments with trainings last year. And it's very different than secular trainings. So those are the 3
Great comments, and we'll take that comment about safe spaces and that term and see how to evolve that. We do talk about, when we talk about safe spaces, making sure that we're emphasizing that it's safe spaces to have conversations and ask questions. So the title is something, titles are important. We'll take a look at making that change. And then it's good to hear that the experiment with using liturgy bore out our experience that doing this kind of training in a more liturgical construct and environment seems to have different take-up rates and different reactions from people from just a secular training. And it's what makes, and we talked about historical Episcopal components, not just historical race components, but historical Episcopalian components. And that also goes to make our training unique for the Episcopal Church, it's putting forth the Jesus movement, our branch, the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. Okay? So, any other comments before I move on? Any other chat items?
That's it so far.
Okay, thank you. So with those components understood, we put together a rubric. Because as I mentioned, our thinking is just because you know the definitions doesn't mean you're ready to do this work. Knowing the definitions is good in your own life to kind of have an awareness of the racism that's around you. But if you're talking about doing anti-racism work and racial reconciliation work, you need to have more than just an awareness. So we look at, and this comes from best practices in training, defining levels of learning, a learning model. So at the very bottom, we talk about awareness level training, which simply makes people aware of definitions. And people who are doing self-improvement, wanting to know what racism is about and recognize it, can get awareness level training in a 2-hour to a 1-day program. But if you want to really be able to do this work, to advocate for racial reconciliation and change, then you need training that's going to be a day to 2 days, at least, to cover all of this material and to get the exercise, the time to do the activities that turn your knowledge into skills for doing this work. At the very top, the mastery level, people who are going to be teaching others to do this work and creating programs to do this work, we expect them to be at a mastery level. We expect that they're going to need to go through a 3-day training and have some facilitation skills along with that. Not just knowing about the material and what we expect the behaviors and the skills to be, but how to deliver this training. What's the pedagogy around all this? So that's the mastery level. The concepts that we talked about, the components that we talked about need to be included in each of these levels, but the sophistication with and the expectation of the capabilities of the person will differ depending upon which of these levels they need to be at. Okay? So hopefully this is making sense. It's not something that's been talked about at all before. And what we're saying, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is anyone who's going to go through ordination, awareness level training is not enough. They need at least competency level training, if not mastery level training. Anyone who's going to be on a leadership committee, according to General Convention Resolution 2000, think it was 2012 B49. Anyone who's on a church level leadership committee needs to have taken anti-racism training. Any delegates to convention need to have taken anti-racism training. So we're saying those people at least need to have an awareness level of training, but we prefer that they have a competency level of training. Okay.
So, comments. The first one that I'll share with you is around the doctrine of discovery, which says that Pope Alexander VI, papal bull in 1493, played a central role in the Spanish conquest of the New World. The doctrine was used by Spain's strategy to ensure its exclusive right to the lands discovered by Columbus the previous year. This is called the doctrine of discovery. Repudiation of this doctrine was passed by the Diocese of Maine and went to General Convention where the repudiation was passed. Then the next one says, they are writing, hang on. The next one says, very helpful analysis. Okay.
I'm reading them now.
Oh, you're reading them now. Good, because they're moving.
So since we took a break, so Linda is saying, when you say ordained people, do you mean priest or priest and deacon? Both. Anyone who's going through the ordination process is an ordained person. So priests and deacons go through the ordination process. David is writing an exercise and awareness I found helpful was to write a spiritual autobiography as understood through the lens of race. So the activities that we have in mind, and many folks have seen in Seeing the Face of God and others, have the activities are essentially writing an autobiography. There are questions that you need to answer and share your response with others. Like, when was the first time you experienced race? When was the first time you recognized that you were of a certain race? Questions like that are the activities that we're expecting folks to take part in. Okay, so it looks like that's about the last one. The last one I see.
Yep.
Good, good. So let's move on. See if I can get that to come back. There we go. So we've gone through the components, and I mentioned before that we're looking at a process for ensuring that people who are going through the ordination process and people who are going to be trainers really get the level of knowledge and skill that is needed, not just checking out the box and saying they took training. So a process that we are proposing as a General Convention resolution, and most of the staff at 815 actually very much like this, is derived from a previous process where Jane Oason was required to be the keeper of a list of people who had been certified. And I said, you know, let's see about how we can leverage technology to do this better. So looking at trainers and looking at individuals, we have a process which we don't care who has done the training. We know that there are trainers out there from many different organizations, Visions to whatever. We don't feel like it's our job to identify and call out what trainers are accepted. We want to focus on what's the outcome. What is the knowledge? What is the skill that the individuals have? So we're creating and publishing this framework that says, here are the skills and knowledge that we expect people to have, whether they're trainers or individuals. And you saw the different levels in the learning model. Here's what we expect. And this has never been done before, so this is a first. We're saying what we expect. The next thing we're saying is we're going to test people. Anyone who's an individual will take a test. Anyone who's a trainer will take a test. And the test that we create will be online. That test will be able to tell whether this person has an awareness level of training, of this work, this information, the skill set, whether this person has a competency level capability, or whether this person has a mastery level of capability. Okay. Now, some people are skeptical that this can be done. This is what I actually do in my day-to-day job. I'm Chief of Staff of the Technical Training Division at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I do this every day. So I know it can be done. And we're going to do it in the church. We're going to take a lead in using technology to do this. So once someone takes the test, we'll know, the system will know, and the provinces are where this information about who's been certified are kept. The provinces are the places, and the dioceses are the places where training is put on, and people need to find who's training, who's certified. So when someone in a diocese or in a province wants to put on a training, they will be able to go to the racial reconciliation page of the Episcopal Church and see a list of people who have been certified as trainers. They'll be able to contact those people and ask them to come do training. And the people in the diocese and the province will have comfort to know that these people have gone through the rigorous certification process that we've put in place. They've taken the test that is built to make sure that they have the knowledge and the skills that we want them to have to help us eliminate the spread of racism. Okay. So, development of the training, hopefully people who are developing this training have gotten the certification, or they've at least looked at, if they're developing, they've at least seen and are following the framework that we're creating, making sure that all the components that we've identified are included in that training. So whomever they're training, as individuals, when they take our certification exam, they'll be prepared to pass it. I'll stop here for questions, thoughts.
Brave new world.
It is indeed. So this slide is really just sharing some resources with you, some high-level resources. The racial reconciliation page, I mentioned, the Episcopal Network for Antiracism and Reconciliation, the Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group right now. There's also a public Facebook group that Yolanda Lee created around antiracism. But this one is a private one. We decided that we wanted a private one because the public group is open to anybody, and we want to avoid negative postings. We want to have it as, and I'm going to use the term safe space, a safe space for us who are doing this work to share our best practices and to ask questions, to ask for help of our peers.
So there's a question about a timeline and a question about getting a copy of the PowerPoint and simulation exercises.
So I will, let's see, what's the best way of doing this? I will have Julie make send out an email to everyone with a pointer to the presentation. Let's see, look at what are the other questions there.
Simulation exercises
to provide some concrete case experience as part of training. So I guess I have to step back and say we are trying very hard not to define how training should be done. We are trying to say there are many ways that training can be done. We recognize that people learn differently. And so we're going to leave it up to the people who are developing training to come up with the ways in which this information and these skills can be best developed. Next, Providence website with link to video pro. Yeah, so the recording, of course, of this session will be up on the Providence One website. So given the challenges, this approach sounds serious and focused. I hope this can get traction and it's taken seriously. We do too. We can't wait. We're so excited about this. And everyone in the church, from the presiding bishop on down, is so excited about this new approach. They can't wait for us to get General Convention to pass it and say, yes, we want to do it. I've already greased the skids with the director of IT at A15. He's totally on board. He says within about a week or so of General Convention approving the resolution that we're putting forth, his team can actually start working on it, and he expects within about a month they'll have a system up and running that will allow for this kind of testing. So that gives you some of the sense of kind of timeline. We're hoping that by the end of the year, this will be in place. Okay. All right. So good. Thank you there.
There's one more question.
If there are many varied varieties of training, what criteria are you planning for certification? So the criteria are knowledge of the concepts that we've identified in the various components. You have to have that knowledge, and you have to have skills to be able to apply that knowledge in doing the work of racial reconciliation. So we're going to have questions on the exam that are case study kinds of questions, just like you go to the Harvard Business School's case study approach. We'll give a case study and say, how would you deal with this situation? And if the person taking the test can describe how they would use the knowledge that they have to address the situation, we'll be able to say, yes, you applied that correctly. You have the knowledge and the skills to do this work. So that's kind of how we're looking at the certification process. My experience with church and sexuality issues was brief attention, but quick disappearance, lost in daily life. Well, so that's a good point, and my sense is that anyone who's going to go through the length that they're going to have to go through to get certified is not just doing it as a one-off. They're going to be committed to this work. They're not going to disappear. This is not going to disappear in their daily life. That's my take on it, at least. We'll see, and we'll tweak this. We had an ECCAR meeting last Monday where we are already talking about enhancements to the framework that we've identified and are about to publish. So we'll get feedback from hopefully from you folks and from others, and we will add to it. We'll tweak it. Okay. So really, my next slide is really just a summary. It's to just recap, review that we've talked about persuasion and Aristotle's about ethos, pathos, and logos that can be used in developing training, should be used in developing training and in putting forth trainings and events. We talked about the framework itself with the 3 components: historical, didactical, and activities, and the learning objectives that should be up front, and respectful communications, and safe spaces, safe, brave spaces that should be in place for that training to happen most effectively. And we've talked about the learning model, the 3 levels of awareness, competency, and mastery, which are applicable for different people who are in different roles in this world of anti-racism and racial reconciliation. So that's what I have, and more thoughts, questions, comments. I'm now looking at the chat totally. So a couple of comments. Are you collaborating with other? Okay, there was one before that. I don't mean training loses interest. I mean church attention and culture lost interest. Oh, well. We have a presiding bishop who will not let us lose sight of this. I think. My conversations with him, he's not going to let this one go. The church will not lose attention on this one. The House of Bishops also, Bishop Prince Singh is our representative to the House of Bishops. He's chair of the House of Bishops Anti-Racism Caucus, and he just shared at our last meeting that the bishops are really wanting to make an impact in this area and want to keep focusing attention on it. Cultural lost interest. I don't want to get political, but what I've observed over the last couple of years, year and a half especially, is that our culture is such that we're not going to lose interest in this. It's only going to become more of an interest to more people. So we have a tool set that we can use to help our culture to progress through this interesting time. Question, are you collaborating with any other denominations, UCC, that have curricular on racism training? I actually am. I have read through what the United Methodist Church has, and I'm in conversations with folks there from their, I'm forgetting the name of their group. They have a group similar to ECCAR that has developed they've actually developed official training for the church, similar to what we did with Seeing the Face of God, which wasn't really official training, but it was developed by Jane Oason, who was the official anti-racism missioner. So I'm aware of that work. I'm aware that there's work being done by the Lutherans and as well, and I'm actually going to be meeting with a Lutheran church representative in about after I get back from Forma. I'll be meeting with them, UCC as well. So the answer there is yes. I guess I'll say. Let's see. Also, Katie says, I'm the Christian Ed chairperson for Maine and serve 3 parishes on information work. Do you have any thoughts on using these work on youth and children? So this is a great question, and Reverend Timothy Siemens, who's going to be presenting this presentation with me at Forma, has actually been doing a lot of thinking about that. We've had some discussions about that. The next version of this, the paper we're putting forth and publishing is going to have some words about youth. What I would say at this point is that we see youth really at the awareness level, and they don't necessarily, depending upon what level they are, what age they are, they may not be ready to understand all of these definitions that we put forth and all of this context. So the next question is, well, which of these components, which of these concepts is appropriate for which age group? And that's the kind of work that I think we're going to be doing next, is trying to come up with that mapping. But what I'll also say is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about going to Forma is that Forma is the place where there are scads of people who are asking that very same question, and I've had some thoughts about that very same question, and we're going to be talking about that probably right after the workshop that Timothy and I are giving, which is exactly what I've shared with you today. So stay tuned. Post the question on. We'll send out. We're going to send out an invitation to all of you, by the way, to join our Facebook group. So post that to the Facebook group. You can post it in the Forma group as well, and see what people think. But it's a great question, one that we are definitely very interested in taking up. I'm going to take a little bit of a breather. Just putting this 28-page thing together has taken a lot of my time and much of the committee's time. But we're going to get to that one too. Very important question. So thank you for asking.
And you see the comment about 8th graders? That was my thought. Because I've learned in some ways that children or young people are a little bit, their context is a little bit different than ours, and so it'll be interesting to see what kind of materials are developed out of their context. What issues do they have a particular need for?
Right, and you know, as I said, and this is really back again to, we want to establish a framework that says what information needs to be known at various levels. And the awareness level is one we're kind of talking about teasing apart a little bit, from adults to down to youth. We are quite expecting that anyone who creates training or programs will be customizing them for their audiences. So we have the customized activities in there as a part of that as well. So we don't have all the answers. We've identified many more than we've had in the past, though. So that's where we are. Next, if there are folks who want to work on this at a province level, I'd be willing to support with a sowing seeds grant. Oh, this must be Julie. Julie's just letting folks know that if you have a particular effort in your diocese or your parish, there are funds which can be made available through the Sowing Seeds grant that needs to be a cross-diocesan effort, but we can certainly work on that. You can work with Julie on that. And Katie Alicki says she'd love to work on it. So come up with something, Katie, and put it forth and chat with other folks and put something together. Other thoughts, comments, questions? How will you take this back to your parish, to your diocese, to your community? I'm curious to hear some thoughts about how you'll take this back. Kate says, I think Lene in New Hampshire would jump on the chance. Well, so the funny story here, Lene's kids and my kids have grown up together. They're basically siblings. So Lene and I have had many conversations. We continue to have conversations about this, and so you're right. Lene jumps on the chance to work on this, and she already has been. We already have been. How are you going to take this forth? Love to see typing in chat. How do you think about taking this forth? Lee says, I'll share this with the beloved community leaders, spin off from social justice. Excellent, excellent, yes. You'll have the deck in the next few days. The 28-page document will be published, and you'll have that as well to point to. So, excellent. We love having this shared. Roll out into the Center of Reconciliation. Yes, yes. The exhibit and the forms, and great. So inviting everybody to be in touch. And if it makes sense, if it would be helpful for me to come down and give this as a presentation, I'm happy to do that. And anyone else who might want this to be presented, I'm happy to make that kind of a presentation, and there are others who we can draw upon to do that too. I'll be talking about this with the new Jonathan Daniels Center in Keene as well, and making it available through that center. So we're open to sharing this with as many people as possible, spreading it, and I invite you to spread the word. Anyone else with thoughts about how to put this forth, how to spread the word here, how to use this in your local context? Linda, I'll definitely bring this to Adult Formation Committee. Yes. They are very interested in this. 15th anniversary of W.B. Du Bois, who's the native of Great Barrington, Mass. Yes, there's a website with a calendar of events this year. Great. There's so many places where this can be shared. And even just sharing the presentation is an educational experience for folks who aren't aware of all of the different aspects of the concepts that really need to be understood to do this work. A traveling exhibit with speakers. Great, so it's something that folks should know about, that traveling exhibit with speakers. Conversation starters. There's a lot here to unpack, I know, so I'm sure there will be many other thoughts about this. And as I said, we're definitely going to invite you all to our private Facebook group, where you should feel free to post your thoughts, comments, questions, queries. There's a plug for the Center of Reconciliation within the Cathedral in Rhode Island. Worth a visit to the website. Question about the Jonathan Daniels little snippet show, and I think it was New Hampshire Chronicle that happened last night. There's the link to it. And the link to the Center for Reconciliation website. Yes, so Karen's mentioning that we do have the provincial, the Province 1 Multicultural Awareness and Cultural Competency Task Force, which Karen chairs and I sit on, I serve, and many of us serve up. We have a small group of folks, Lee's on it too, but we're always looking for others who will help us to put forth these webinars, these webcasts, and to identify other activities that will help dioceses across the province to do this work. So if you're interested in that, we do meet monthly via Zoom, just like we're meeting here, to talk about future webcasts and what's going on around the province, and how we can help others to leverage what's going on around the province.
And I would say that we, as James said, we are always looking for new members, and you may have people that you want to recommend to us that would be good, or topics or individuals that could offer something for our web conferences.
Absolutely. Okay. So I think we've come then, unless there's any other comment or thought that someone's dying to share, I think we can have a closing prayer.
Okay. Let us pray. Gracious God, support us all the day long until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes. The busy world is hushed, the fever of life is over, and our work is done. Then in your mercy, grant us safe lodging, a holy rest, and peace at last through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all, and
Thank you.
good night. So I'm not seeing a stop recording control.